So as a lot of you know, we're supposed to be in Puerto Rico right now working on our suntan. Instead, we're in bright and sunny Holly Springs this year. Raise your hand if it's your first CXps event. Great. All right, so you're getting a little bit of a taste of what CXps is like. It is one of the only conferences that I know of that leaders from different competing firms sit across the table from one another and openly, fearlessly communicate about how they're differentiating in the market. They work on each other's business challenges together, and they openly share how they're differentiating, and I think it's amazing. So we're excited to announce that the 10th year and our 10th anniversary of CXps will be in Puerto Rico next year. It's going to be at the Wyndham Rio Mar, the Rio Grande, Puerto Rico, and we've made this sizzle reel. There may have been or may not have been a margarita or two involved when we made this. So please bear with the cheap acting, and please enjoy the video. At CXps, we know client experience is what matters most to you.
So of course, our 10th CXps needs to bring an amazing experience to you.
How do we improve an event that already has an incredible 94 Net Promoter Score?
Well, we had to make some exciting changes.
Join us in Puerto Rico for 3 days of learning, connecting, and memory-making experiences.
We're down here in Puerto Rico planning big things for you. Not only do you get breakouts, workshops, and networking, but you'll get to go on an experience outing with a small group in a place like this.
Or this.
Or this!
Or this!
Go.
Or this!
Or this.
Or this!
And collaborate with your group the next day in a workshop to map journeys, diagnose experiences, and apply what you learned to your own business.
CXps is education, inspiration, and real-life hands-on learning.
But don't take our word for it. Take a listen to what last year's attendees had to say.
It's probably for me an opportunity to challenge myself with probably some of the hot topics that people are focusing on, hear what my peers are focusing on, and hear within the professional services industry the different verticals and how they're dealing with those issues.
We're all in the professional services industry, and I found it very helpful to meet and network with people that work for an architecture firm or an engineering firm or an accounting firm. There's a lot of overlap and shared learning.
I would say that there's probably no better place for a CX professional to come to a conference. I mean, I'm in legal, so I've been to different legal marketing conferences. There might be programming here and there around CX, but it's nothing like this. So if you're trying to launch a career in CX, to meet all these people and to get all this great information, I think it can't be matched.
Great news. No passport needed. Check the hotel and the flights. Same travel cost as before.
So come join us for this amazing experience. Visit clientexperience.org and register today.
Yeah, you now see why I proactively apologized. So next we have a panel. It's going to be Tim Asimos here and Karen Jackson, Mr. Wade Styons, and Joe Leopold. Look forward to hearing what you all have to say.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Keep enjoying your lunch. I will get the panel started. I would just like to have each of you go down the line and tell us a little bit about your background. Ladies first. We'll start with Karen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karen Jackson. I have been in CX before they called it CX. I used to be called the executive exorcist because when accounts, you know that honeymoon period when you first win the deal, right? And everything's wonderful, and your client's madly in love with you. You're madly in love with them. And then it starts to get the reality of the socks on the floor kind of thing. So I started my career at GE. I'm much older probably than a lot of you in the room, when Jack Welch was the CEO. And it was a great place to be. And it was also a great place to kind of practice what Jack believed in, which was every time you show up, you want to make a client fall in love with you and want to see you again and again. So that to me was like the origin of CX, customer experience. They didn't have that kind of phrase for it, but it put a lot of burden on you. So when we would go to a client's meeting, if my manager saw me in the hall, he'd say, okay, what did the stop open at that morning? If our meeting was in the afternoon. And if you didn't know your customer's numbers or your client's numbers, somebody else got your speaking part for that meeting. He'd send someone else to tag team you. So basically what that said to me at a very early start of my career was I needed to know what was important to the customer. So I left GE, went to work for a number of Fortune 500 companies. I've traveled internationally, and I've always focused on that value creation piece that Brian was talking about. That is so critical. You lead with empathy, you add insights, and you definitely put the cherry on top in terms of appreciation whenever you're working with your clients. And you're helping them get places that they could not get to on their own. So I loved his presentation because it just reinforces what I've been doing for the past 20 years. And I'm very excited to be here with my esteemed colleagues, Wade and Jeff. Wade?
Yeah, sure.
It's better. So my name's Wade Steins. I was an attorney. I'm a trained attorney, so I didn't come at this from a client experience perspective originally. I've worked for accounting firms and law firms in the international tax space. So I was much more of eyes down for the first part of my career for the first 7-8 years. But now I'm in more of a role where I coordinate global services for our 165 different firms around the world. And the way I got kind of put into that position was doing things that we saw in Ryan's presentation, understanding your client, making sure that you really delivered on what their expectations were. And, those types of things. I got brought in as a relationship repairer. And so they put us on some of the biggest accounts, some of the biggest messes, and untangling those, then you can't leave the relationship because you got such a warm, cozy relationship with the client. You kind of got to stay on that one as they move you to the next one, So I've had to develop a team under me and train these same things, but we didn't always understand we were training client experience professionals. We always called it something else, but like we are very much following the same formulas that we've seen played out here. And I think we're trying to do a better job of it in our U.S. space, right? So we're doing it with an international space through my team. But I think part of these real conversations that we're having about what are the things we're doing wrong, right? Like if we all have an amen party, we're not learning anything. And so it's also about talking about, where your failures are and where you want to see growth and where you're trying to develop and push growth.
Can you guys hold the microphone, please?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hey, I'm Joe Leopold. I'm with Pinion Global. We are a accounting, audit, wealth management, estate planning, et cetera, firm. I was brought on a little over a year ago, as their first dedicated CX professional. Prior to that, I was with a small tech outfit called Zillow, you might have heard of, and in the relations space. So I was a practitioner there and not a strategist, and now that is flipped. So lots of big swings this year with Pinion going all in on CX, and I was part of that initiative. That's, everything that Ryan is discussing. The importance of proposed value right now is something that is a term that's thrown around a lot. That's where we're hitting, both feet on the floor. So
awesome. So I'd like to hear from each of you, and we'll start with Joe down here. What's a CX initiative that you're currently or recently have worked on that's been impactful for your firm?
Sure. So hugely valuable, a process that we have put in place that so in CX, you all probably know the issue is finding tangible data, useful data, correlating that with financial data for leadership, right? That's always the question in the room. How does this relate to money? And how do we take ownership of these principles and processes? So recently, we've defined a formula for that in defining churn, client churn, splitting that in classified sections of what we can help and what we can't help. And we defined that that area that we could potentially prevent as regrettable churn. That's the term that we use at our firm. It's regrettable because we had an opportunity to repair that relationship or intercede and change the client's mind. Not on that list are, unfortunately, if the client's deceased, goes out of business, things like that, things that are outside of our power. Within that column of regrettable, it's if the client has communicated to us before leaving that they are they had a poor value or fee perception. They felt our fees were too high, or the value they were getting for those that invoicing wasn't substantial. It could be communication or responsiveness issues. They felt that we weren't responsive to their needs or left them hanging on a large project for too long. It can be, turnover of opinion staff, somebody that was with one of our staff members for many years and took those clients with them. So anything that's preventable in that realm, we took a close look at and took ownership of that and broke down that data into financials as well. So if somebody's interested in looking at a trend or forecast for how many clients we lost month over month, year over year, based on fees and value perception specifically, we can correlate all of those clients under those terms and put an exact dollar amount. This is how much we lost due to value perception issues with the firm. And so forth. You can cross-cut that across the board. If any, and I won't go super long on this. If anybody wants me to workshop that with them afterwards, get with me, and I'll give you a breakdown on what the governance is involved there. But in a nutshell, the way that that's useful is if your organization does an ambitious fee raise across the board, across all of your services, and you see 3 months in that you're trending 50% higher on fee and value perception, regrettable churn, that's a good indicator to you that number one, you need to look at that start of that fiscal year price hike, and you can do one of two things: either tamper that down a little bit or start implementing a behavioral change with your relationship managers and teaching them how to express the value of that change. But that's a big one. That was a long-winded answer.
So I love your answer. I'm a data geek, but I want to give you a different initiative that I worked on. But I'm mad about customer analytics dashboards. We surveyed prior to me starting my own firm this year. We surveyed international customers. We could do the same thing. We could isolate based on Net Promoter Score, what the revenue, what the profitability, what the margins were. Were they a promoter? Were they passive? Were they a detractor? And how that translated to our top and bottom line. So I'm all on board for that, but I won't do a deep dive there. One of the things that one of the initiatives we found particularly powerful, and Ryan had a slide that said customer panel. We didn't call it a customer panel. For those of you who've been at this game for a little bit, a couple years, as well as those who are starting, this is a cultural transformation. Regardless of where your company is, your firm is, you're still trying to evolve the culture to a better place. You're trying to increase and strengthen the level of relationship you have with your clients, right? So one of the things we did to try and really get that customer intimacy going for some of the key accounts, the more strategic accounts, was I call it the market level customer events. So what we do, we take customers to Topgolf. We take them on boat cruises. We take them in intimate spaces and places, no more than 12 customers. And we'd use that opportunity not to have a conference, but to have a conversation about their business, find out what their key milestones were coming up, as well as what their biggest disappointments were. You get to know a little bit more about how they're defining and assigning success and value. And we also ask them, what can we do better? Okay, what can we do to improve our level of relationship? What can we do to increase the level of value delivery and so on? And when you get people in that intimate space, we usually start after drinks, right? We provide drinks, food, and but yeah, we want them to feel like we're vested in getting to know them as a person. So we lead with empathy. We provide insights, and we leave them with the level of appreciation we have whenever they spend their quality time, because usually that's discretionary time on their part, right? And we act on what we hear. So one of the things we heard when my last role was the vice president for a real estate investment trust company, and one of our customers said, we don't like the language you use in your contracts. It's a parent-child or subordinate kind of demeaning thing. So landlord-tenant, if you're in industrial real estate or commercial real estate, typically the contracts say landlord-tenant. They hate that. Okay, so what they asked us to do was think about very thoughtful about language. We understand their legal definitions for landlord and tenant, but we'd like to be thought of. You always say your customer first. Why can't we be business partners? You know, and what that did for me, it just really shifted. We talk a lot about customer satisfaction. I think that's the wrong place to be looking. I think that's where you start, but it's really about customer success. And what does that customer need to do in order for them to take their next milestone? And how do we add value to that? How do we partner with them for their continued success? Because I found if we partner with our customers on what's important to them, the money comes and we become less vulnerable to the competition. But isn't it interesting? Language drives behavior. We're the landlord, you're the tenant. And when I looked back at our communications to our tenants, or our customers, our business partners who were in warehouse spaces around the world, if they're a little late on invoice, if there's some trash out in front of the building, we talk to them like parent-child. So we revamped all of those communications, and it was so insightful to hear them tell us that. And we hadn't even thought of it that way, right? So customer engagement strategies like having market level customer events. Go meet the customer where they are. Pick a place that they would not normally go to on their own. So if everybody golfs, we're at a country club golfing, don't go to Top Golf. Take them somewhere else, a cooking class, someplace that they would not necessarily go outside of work on their own, and just give them your 100% undivided time and attention.
So is this volume right? So I think the biggest thing for us is in the international space, we've been coordinating and working. We've got a head start on the rest of our professional services here in the U.S. because we have a one point of contact. We can control the client experience much better through kind of a central contact team. When the U.S., we have multiple teams delivering a lot of different services to the client. So we may have audit team involved, tax team involved, SALT team involved. So we could have, and that's one of the things as a key indicator, at least in the accounting world, has always been the stickiness. The most likely for them not to turn over and leave you is the more services you have in their, with them. But what we're finding in the feedback we were getting is that a lot of those service lines, so if they were having a merger or a transition, they were having to tell 5 different teams, and they want to have a central point of contact, somebody who disseminates very important information that affects all of the different service lines seamlessly, right? They want to make sure the right hand's talking to the left hand, and they don't want to have to share this to multiple teams or reiterate it over. And so what we're doing is we're trying to create a tax managed services group that basically does that for them. It manages all of the different service deliveries where you sit over top, you're the main communicator, you bring people to quarterly meetings where ideas and topics get discussed. But that came directly from client feedback, right? And it's an innovation, it's a change in our industry. Going back to what Karen said earlier, this is a growth, right? This is not natural for a lot of these companies that have been around a while. And there's some real leaders in this room when I talk about the investment that some of the firms have made to customer experience like you see it really in this room. There's multiple professionals and people on top of it. And I think that's where this is going, right? I think you're going to have to put a defined process around it, and you have to get on board because it's, everybody, we can talk about different measurements, but everybody measures everything by money. And the profitability, what we're finding and what we found is the more money a client pays you, the more they like you. Our most successful margin accounts are those where they're the happiest. And so they're both intricately linked, and learning that is something that doesn't always present itself easily on a piece of paper.
So Karen, you mentioned something that struck me. You talked about that CX is all about, it's a cultural change. It's a cultural transformation. I'd like to hear from each of you, and we'll start with you, Karen. What are some of the ways that firms can create a culture that is truly customer-centric?
So one of the things that I did when I first joined the REIT, I was there almost 5 years. They had no customer focus, really. We have customers, right? We have clients, and they're large ones: Amazon's, DHL, BMW. I mean, they're all the names you would think of across most industry vertical, healthcare, whatever. But what they measured most was, the first year I did I revamped the customer survey. The COO at the time, when we got passives and detractors, how many square feet are they in? So bigger was better. So if you got a customer that's in 1 million square feet, like an Amazon in Brazil, compared to a customer that's in 40,000 square feet, same, they treated the bigger customers better. And what I needed to do from a data perspective is show them that 80% of our portfolio were small and mid-market customers. So yeah, you can be really nice to the big guys, the Pepsi-Colas and the AstraZenecas and so on. But what would happen if 80% of our portfolio walked out the door and went to a competitor? And who's responsible who owns the customer? The people on the front line own the customer. And at the top, the leadership was taking Cool Point credit for the margin, the profitability, and so on, and would get interviewed. The CEO gets interviewed with Jim Cramer, and we do, the company did really, really well. But who's driving that profitability? It's the people on the ground. It's the people that are getting called that when something goes sideways, who do they call? It's our Ghostbusters, right? So what we ended up doing in order to, first of all, they were pretty, the level of employee engagement was uneven. In order to have a best-in-class CX program, you have to have a best-in-class EX program. So you put your employees first. And you got to make them feel important. You have to make them feel appreciated, and you got to show them that you're operating on and taking action on their insights. So we started this trusted partner program where we did the same thing with them. We had intimate settings where we asked them to tell us, show and share what's going well and what's getting in the way of them doing their best work, however they defined it. Once they felt that they were being listened to, okay, you accelerate everything you have in terms of aspirations for CX for your customers. We created a Rockstar program. We created employee recognition programs of each other, right? They know what they're doing on the ground that's been really cool. They know how they're supporting each other as far as teams. We actually changed roles and titles. So we used to call them property managers. Then they became real estate customer experience managers, right? We changed maintenance guys, right? They weren't maintenance guys. They were customer success and delivery managers, right? I mean, you change roles. People start to walk into those higher expectations you have of them and they have for themselves. And when you start to remove those roadblocks that are getting in the way of them doing their best work. Hopefully that answers.
Great. Joe?
Culture change. So this year we introduced a pretty substantial document, and it's Pinion's CX Accord is what we've termed it. and it's our handbook for how we do client experience. And that was released firm-wide. We're socializing it now, integrating it within teams, having meetings with teams regarding that document, and getting commitment statements unique to those teams. So it has a set, grouping of standards that we've defined as how our firm does CX. It has a checklist in there for our external client-facing relationship folks. And then it has individual case studies for all of those standards, both internal and external facing. So for our operations and support staff, what does this standard mean if I don't directly interface with clients? This is what it looks like internally, so that it's inclusive to everybody. That was a big undertaking, and it's going to be a ongoing socialization project, but it's also going to be leveraged for onboarding for new clients or for new employees when they come to the firm. When they go through their onboarding process with us, that's integrated in there to let them know, this is how we do this. You're coming into the firm, you don't know anybody, you don't know our practices. We feel that impact for new employees to the firm is going to really, year over year kind of ramp up our CX efforts. In addition to that, we started a designated feedback process, designated inbox, and a widget within our intranet page for people within the firm to anonymously, or however they want to do that. There's options for that to give us feedback, both positive and negative. Positive stories are then kind of redacted if needed and published to the firm. And then we started a CXcellence Award program that is voted on based on a sampling of those by our executive leadership team. So that speaks to speaks volumes when you have leadership involved in a process like that, saying, designating award systems for that kind of gives relevance to the CX initiatives that we're pushing. And those things are kind of ongoing. We're having quarterly firm-wide conversations that are topical with the entire firm, those that want to join, and those just keep, and that's me and Jen facilitating those on a topic that we are hearing from EX internal feedback within the firm, handoff processes, debriefing processes. What does that look like? Going from one service line to the next, an individual's been working with a client for 3 or 4 years, knows their kids' names, where they go to school. All of that, in our opinion, should be translated in a 30-minute debrief session that's packaged and bottled with a bow on it for any service line that client hops over to. There shouldn't be cut down that get to know you process for the client. They should walk into that meeting with whoever their new relationship person is in that market or service line, knowing a lot about them, knowing their history with our company at the very least. So we are implementing those strategies to the best of our ability with a mighty team of 2, but it's working. It's working.
Yeah, so I think talking about employees, right? We talked about process. We've talked about making them feel supported and training them on what the process is and making sure things are clear. But I think setting a good role model and an example, when you get on the phone and you de-escalate a situation, when you're talking with a client, letting newer staff, I think this is one of the things we've done that's trained the most, is there's a conversation style. There's something that new staff that are going to sometimes be put in these situations where they hear pushback or complaint and they have to escalate a situation are the front line, right? And having those people be a part of the meetings where you bring it down and you help them learn the conversation style, how to de-escalate a situation, how to have that conversation. And I think another thing is no matter how frustrated somebody is, you just never throw your own employees under the bus, right? Like, I think one of the things that you get different personality types and anything in a gut reaction, they're not well trained, right? They may go to that defense mechanism as, well, I'm sorry that Shannon did that she's, like, and I think there's a lot more productive ways but until you run into a situation like that, you don't know how you're going to get caught cold. So the hands-on training, letting them be a part of bigger discussions than maybe what their role requires or would normally allow, has turned out to be an extremely helpful training tool, in addition to the things my fellow panelists mentioned. But I think that shouldn't be undervalued. It's worked really well for us.
I have one other thing that I think is
key and critical. So when you work at engineering firms, law firms, insurance firms, wealth, financial services firms, it's really important that people do things right. In terms of CX and EX, what was really freeing, if you surveyed our team, was we gave them permission to do the right thing. So sometimes you can do things right, and it's not doing the right thing for your customer. Let me give you an example. Our process used to require all of our customers pay us by EFT, electronic funds. When you have a small business owner and they pay their bill by EFT, that's great. But what happens when we owe them money? We were cutting them a check. And usually we reconcile the accounting towards the end of the calendar year. So imagine you being a small mid-market client. You get a check. Good news. We owe you $22,000. You take it to your bank. That bank puts a hold on that check for a number of days. So you don't get your funds like that, electronic funds transfer, right? So there are exceptions that can be made to do the right thing that we really, you want to take a hard look at. You don't do it for every client, but there are circumstances that warrant it. Your teams know how to do things right, but they need to have your air cover to do the right thing as well. So that's the only thing.
Great point. Wade, you mentioned in your introduction actually about delivering on customer and client expectations. That's a big part of CX. So I'd like to hear from each of you. What are ways your firms properly set expectations with clients as well as manage those expectations in order to deliver on them?
Well, I'll go right back to Ron's PowerPoint earlier, right? Proactive communications, trying to anticipate what may go wrong, communicating it as soon as you know. It's the other thing is trying to, when you are looking up and you're seeing around the world, what I'm dealing with is I'm looking at 165 different countries who had an earthquake, who may have parents or kids involved. Where's the tsunami hit? Where are they celebrating a big religious holiday and response times may be slower? People who are doing business out of the U.S. a lot of times don't even think. It's not that they're not considerate. It's just they're looking down. They're focused on their deliverable, their thing. And setting the expectations or just having that early conversation around, listen, here's what's going on. Here's what's happening. So I think setting it for the things you can anticipate, you should be, aware of what's going on in your regions and the service delivery experts in that region. But I think proactive communication, when something comes up, just be honest. I think sitting down with your client, if you're building a relationship and you're partnering, then you have to have an honest conversation. And sometimes that honest conversation is, look, I screwed up. Like this got messed up and it's going to push us back a week. Here's what we can do. I've talked to the team. This is what we're going to do to offset it, make it as the least amount of pain you can feel, right? But I think at the same time, you come into them proactively and having that discussion point is fundamental. And I think it goes into so many other parts of the relationship that you can't really have it any other way, right? I think that's the most important thing from my perspective.
So setting and managing expectations. I'm going to tell you a story where we got it wrong. I spent a large time of my career in IT. I was director of an engineering center, and you write outsourcing contracts, and they have stipulations. The system can only go down for 29 minutes per month anywhere around the world. If it goes 30, there's a penalty. There's a financial penalty.
We had a contract with an Australian oil company, and we're feeling really good about it. We were meeting with the leadership team after the first year. We had never hit 29. We were inside of it. The CEO took the stage. We're in Sydney in December. That's their summer. And you could see a lot of arms folded like this around the table. So I've traveled to 6 continents and 14 countries on a regular basis. And this doesn't have to mean bad news, right? It could mean they're cold, but it seldom is good news when all the leadership team has their arms folded. So our CEO is feeling really emboldened because we had the dashboards, we had all the downtimes, we had the DR, disaster recovery, we had everything's green, right? Red, yellow, green, everything's green, 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 green. And this whole report and readout had been socialized with this Australian company before we got there. And thankfully, our CEO had the wherewithal. He was getting ready to take a seat because he'd gone through his 3 slides. And he said, guys, help me out. You know, we got all this green and you guys are sitting here like this. What's up? Well, the contract was written for 29 minutes. The leadership team was incented and their teams were incented or less. So every time it hit 28, which was inside of our 29 SLA, money got taken out of their pockets. So whose responsibility was it for us to know what their operating metric was for their incentive plans or their performance bonuses? Was it our miss? Was it their miss because they didn't tell us? Well, it was our miss, right? Because we asked, how do you define success? And we missed it. So the CEO said, obviously, he's going to reimburse for the loss, right? But we were limping behind feet 5 years. It was. So I guess rule number 1 in terms of setting and managing expectations is get clear on what their expectations are. Value like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You need to know, what matters most, because what you see depends on where you sit. We had legal look at it. We had the executive team look at it. We had their IT teams look at the contract before it was inked, and we still got it wrong. But we didn't have a conversation about what does a good year look like for you at an organizational level, at a personal level. What key metrics are you trying to hit? So just cautionary tale, because that really, like I said, we were on the defense for far too long, simply because we didn't ask that critical thinking question.
Unfortunately, you learn often from the mistakes,
Absolutely.
right? So
Those
that's
are
a
powerful.
great story, powerful, well-worn, well-learned story, but thanks for sharing that. Joe?
I'm just probably going to mockingbird these two up here. I mean, it's from a CX perspective, it's hard for me to there's no strategy I can come up with for every service line within the firm, every relationship manager, and how they set expectations with individual clients, right? But what we can do, in our laboratory is set up ways to implement process that allows clients to know what to expect from us as a firm. You can expect us to take ownership when we've done, when we've failed in some regard. You can expect us to reach out to you for further context if there's a bad relationship issue that's come across our radar. You can expect us to be in contact with you regularly. And we set expectations by, in the last year by hoping to set that tone and establishing new client gifting and welcome gifting and referral gifting, just little things from us to let them know that we're thankful for them and that you can expect this in the future from us, that we're thankful for your business and we're thankful that you're there. Anytime going back to that regrettable churn formula that we have, once there's a threshold of fees or a financial threshold that's been crossed as regarding a loss for a client, I reach out to those clients. All of those clients get contacted by us. Whoever is handling the relationship and project for that client gets contacted by us. And that's not a gotcha. It's not us throwing anybody under the bus. We just want context. We want to know what were the nuances involved in losing this client that was, previously paying us $80,000-$90,000 a year, right? Sometimes the designation there in Dynamics isn't enough. Well, they left because of fees. We want to know more, and then we compile that data and cross-reference it to hopefully get ahead of trends and forecasts. But clients can expect to hear from us, and we are we're not shy about that, and we're nice about it too. But yeah.
So Ryan talked in his presentation about different types of feedback. I'd like to hear from each of you. What role does capturing feedback play in your firm's CX, and what different types of feedback are you collecting? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump into this one because we're terrible at it. We're not doing a great enough job. We're counting on the account managers to internally report and to check in periodically, and nobody likes to hear bad feedback, so people are hesitant to ask for it. So I think this is actually a strong level of improvement that I'm going to take back to my team, is trying to get more structured, getting feedback from the clients that's not driven by an individual where they got to be afraid of hurting feelings. Get it more anonymous, and because I just don't think people are always, you can be open and honest, but you can't always feel like the customer's going to say something's going to hurt your feelings, right? And sometimes you're the one that needs to hear it. So I think that's something that we are working on process improvements for. We're using survey technology through our global portal. So we're making headway there, more to come, but it's an area of an improvement. So
Feedback. How many people use Salesforce? Anybody use Salesforce? Okay. I'll give you, I love what Joe said about continuity of understanding of your clients. Last year I did a workshop at CXps, and I had a slide that said stranger danger. Right? We tell our kids that, but you'd be surprised at how much we don't know about our customers. And if he's got the legacy knowledge in his head and he hits the lottery tomorrow, right, then his mighty team of two becomes a team of one, and we've lost all this legacy knowledge. So it doesn't have to be Salesforce, but I do think concerted efforts should be made to capture, retain, and communicate customer feedback. It's really hard to broadcast a good, but it's harder to broadcast bad news. One initiative that I put in place was to capture, in the annual survey, they rate us on Net Promoter Score, but they also rate us on 9 key performance indicators, like anticipating needs, like did we deliver innovation to their company? Did we accelerate their ability to go to market? Did we help them, in some meaningful way get more business? Those kinds of, and we take the anecdotal feedback and we put it in their employee record in Salesforce. So anybody that looks up, we have the last contact, the last warm touch we have with the customer. If it's positive, negative, or indifferent, we take the little snippet from that anecdotal feedback. We show how they rated us last year on Net Promoter Score and the year prior. And, we also follow up, like my colleague said, I thankfully we didn't have a lot of detractors. If you survey, you get 3,000 surveys back, you're probably going to get about 300 to 400 detractors. So I made sure that I reached out and touched those customers to find out what is driving that negative feedback, right? I tried to do it up front and in person. I've been to Poland, Paris, Pittsburgh, but when I couldn't, I still called them because, to Wade's point, they don't want to tell the team on the ground that's responsible for service delivery their news, but they feel comfortable volunteering it in a survey. But we got to take actions against it. So it's important sometimes to have a neutral third party find out, well, why did they say what they said? And what would make a difference? What would make a meaningful difference? What would need to change in order for you not to say that again, right? What kind of behavior will we have to demonstrate for you to feel comfortable that we heard you, we acted on it, and it's no longer an issue? I love what Wade said about owning your stuff. You got to own your stuff, right? If you get in front of your clients, and I used to work for a consulting firm that had 3 acronyms, and we like to think that we're the smartest, right? You get up in front of your customers. When I would do a presentation with a client, 5 bullets, when I'm summarizing whatever this is, I leave 2 bullets blank. So I'm basically there to communicate what are the top 3 points. If they don't listen to anything else I have to say or my team has to say, what are the top 3 takeaways? And then I leave 2 blank bullets and I say, what have I missed? So the customer will volunteer their truth in that moment. And usually that leads to another opportunity, or it leads to an incredible insight that allows us a course correction before we screw up further, or it always leads to some positive outcome. So I would just, all of this is important. All of it is powerful, and all of it is not easy. And I think when people say customer experience, they think, oh, that's the smoozing and boozing part, right? That's not what it is, right? It's really, you're the translation table for how you can increase your firm's top and bottom lines in a way that accelerates their success and anchors and reinforces your client's continued success. So it's not easy stuff. So I applaud all of you guys for taking this on, because it is a cultural transformation.
Great. We'll start with that. So feedback. I'll piggyback on what I said before. Surveys are great, right? And scoring is great. All that's great. We all know the pitfalls and the benefits of surveying. Just about anybody in this room has been through the trials and errors with those. A lot of the surveys get to the client after their hair is on fire and the smoke is gone, the fire is out, and it's and we're finding out about things after the fact, which is actionable, but it doesn't help that client. So in terms of culture and inspiring that within our firm, we hosted one of our CX coffee chats, which is one of our quarterly conversations with the firm, and it was all around feedback. And we asked the firm, how would you prefer to give us feedback as it comes? How do we put this top of mind for you in your email correspondence with a client over time? We're all trained to do this, and every one of us has done this, where a client is giving, a significant praise in the midst of discussing business in that email. They're praising something that we're doing well, or that person with that relationship is doing well, and you don't tell anybody. You're just thankful to hear that you're doing a good job, and you move on with your day. You move on to the next task. And so what we've done is really put top of mind within our firm. If you find, communication like that, good or bad, here we've created a designated inbox for that, feedback@pinionglobal.com, right? That can be an anonymous thing. You can do it, however you want to send that to us, but yank those snippets, clip those out of those email conversations. Give us an email if it was had in a verbal conversation. And then what that's created is kind of a funnel of information. So we have another avenue while the client is still with us, their hair isn't on fire yet, and we get to correlate what we're doing well from that feedback process. And it's an implemented process, and making it clear to the firm that nobody's in trouble here, good, bad, what have you. This only helps to improve our firm overall and helps us do our job better. All of this relates back to retention and growth, and it's working really well for us.
So, Karen, you mentioned KPIs. I have a question for the panel around KPIs. What are some of the KPIs, key performance indicators. If you don't know what KPI is, what are some of the measurements that you're using for customer experience? So how do you know if your firm is delivering what you're setting out to deliver?
So I did a market research. I funded a market research activity. So when I first joined the company 5 years ago, and strategic customers, and who are the top 10 for the smallest customers. And I hired a market researcher to talk to them about what does success look like, what does a good relationship look like, what do you feel, what do they do, what don't they do, kinds of things. So we created profiles. I guess it might relate a little bit to the empathy mapping, right? Where we wanted to understand what all that looks like, so that we could emulate it and replicate it and be radically consistent about it. And it led to a lot of people think they know what satisfies a customer. We found out what we were thinking satisfied a customer didn't satisfy a customer. In order to give us a net promoter score, the KPIs, key performance indicators, we had 9 of them. And there were 9 only because we had such a diverse customer base. They had different profiles. But what we found out was anticipating needs was really important to our customers. Us understanding their business was critically important to the customer. A lot of KPIs talk about execution, time to resolution, speed to answer, those kinds of things. And while those are important, we found out we're placing weighted values, anticipating needs, understanding their business, which were helping them innovate and deliver against customers' expectations. So we teased out some KPIs we never would have thought about. And if you're not already doing that, I would suggest that you do that, because you may be chasing just the industry standard KPIs that don't matter as much to your clients and their firms as you think they do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of what I've already discussed today. It's measuring, hard data through our regrettable churn process. It's measuring data through, survey campaigns. But looking at all that information year over year, I mean, if you can correlate trends and kind of, you can try and predict all day. Forecasting's tough, especially with CX and actionable, process changes, so on and so forth. But if you can get a finger on the pulse and you have, your colleagues are engaged in the same way that you are, the KPIs are ongoing and developing, and they'll change year over year as the big rocks that leadership defines year over year change. But in the current landscape, in the inflated economy, retention's huge, right? So if we look at our retention numbers, that's a big one for us as of right now, as everyone's kind of watching their pocketbooks closer, and it doesn't look like we're going to get out of there anytime soon. It's a constantly evolving, moving target for us in terms of KPIs. But yeah,
I think the biggest thing is to keep watching for them to change. I've got a client that's grown and grown and grown, and they've changed every year. What they feel like is important to them and their business model. And so if you ever get a set list and you're not refreshing it, then you're making a big mistake, because everything changes. That's the one thing that stays the same, right? And I think so, keeping your eyes open, starting with a good set, and I think with, like for us, there were some services we were providing that we were pricing that, they just didn't have any value to them anymore. Their team had grown. We were chasing around some herding cats they didn't want herded anymore. So we were able to increase our profit, lower our costs by listening, and by hearing what was valuable to them in the moment and how it had changed. So I think that's the biggest thing about KPIs is keep them flexible, right? There's some things where you have to have a standard process. You have to have things, but I think with KPIs, it's important that they're flexible and you're always looking for new ones that could impact the relationship.
So we got a couple more minutes. I wanted to open it up to the audience to see if you had any questions for the panel. Sure.
See things from the legal work. How do you think the capacity of the industry, right? Difficult to get accountants these days. How do you think CX helps manage that? Could you repeat the question from the first one?
So there's limited professional assistance in both the accounting and the legal world, right? There's just not enough accountants and lawyers, I believe, for the legal student. And how does having a good CX program improve that retention? Did I get your question right there?
Yeah, retention and then also just customer growth. Is it a good way to kind of put governor on the growth so that you're managing it, not just new clients in the group?
So I think a good CX strategy, more than just making growth, it helps you become efficient. It helps you focus on the things that are really hard. It helps you give them the service that they expect. I think a lot of times that people, the other thing too is you develop processes that have been for standardized and efficiency, you get around with processes, the more comfortable employees are, right? So I think, in my opinion, having less turnover, more experience, and having a good CX process really brings a lot of efficiency
To the internal staff and happiness, less turnover. So if you're dealing with happy clients, you're usually a happy professional. When you're getting drugged through the mud constantly and everybody's complaining about everything, right? Then you got about 2 years and you're looking for the next gig, right? So I think having good processes around how you avoid escalations and handle escalations really do improve the employee's experience under you and with your team. Yeah, I think. And anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think we have time for one more question. Anyone else? I'll bring the microphone to you. Okay, well, I'll take it from here, Tim, since I have the mic. Thank you, Wade. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Tim, for moderating. Really helpful, useful information. And I look forward to trying to tie all that knowledge together during the closing remarks. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, man.